I've just clocked in 350 hours in Dark Souls 3, and I know what you're thinking. Amateur shit, right? This game is so freaking badass that you can't even get the full story unless you read 500 item descriptions and explore its world thoroughly. Oh wait, you're saying you don't have time for that? But don't you worry, I've got you covered. I've decided to once again return to Lothric and figure out which bosses in Dark Souls 3 are most likely to make you watch a 30 to an hour long lore video on YouTube. The bosses of Dark Souls 3 are some of the best boss fights of all time, and honestly are just another example of how From Software never misses. After the success of Bloodborne in 2016, From Software blessed us once again with another masterpiece. We finally got our climactic ending to the Dark Souls trilogy, with the game's lore and setting borrowing heavily from Dark Souls 1. Yeah, I'm not complaining. And being the final entry in a trilogy does play to its advantages, deepening the lore and making it all the richer. That's why today, I decided to rank all the bosses in Dark Souls 3. I'm going to rank them off lore, difficulty, and art direction, and give you my reasons why. I really hope you guys stacked up on Estus and Embers. Who's going to claim the top spot? Let's find out. The fire fades, Ashen One, and don't you dare go hollow. What the fuck is this? Oh my god. Color right, they said. It'll be faster, they said. Well, fuck it. Off to Lothric. Number 25. Ancient Wyvern. Much less of a boss fight, and much more of an action set piece. The Ancient Wyvern ambushes Ashen One 2 times during his journey through Archdragon Peak. One time in the giant courtyard, after the first bonfire, and another time leading into the Great Belfry. But it's the first encounter, after the first bonfire, that I would consider the most important. And you know, because of the health bar. Overall, not much is known about the Ancient Wyvern lore-wise, besides the fact that he's extremely ancient. Yeah, no shit. And after running around the entirety of Archdragon Peak's courtyard, and making your way to the top, you'll be able to jump off the side and plunge Ashen One's sword directly into the Ancient Wyvern's head, acquiring the Dragonhead Stone in the process. A stone that allows the player to transform into the head of a dragon and breathe fire, with its one condition being that it's irreversible until death. Yeah, it's ass. After finally defeating the Ancient Wyvern, Ashen One will get teleported to the Dragonkin Mausoleum, acting as the Ancient Wyvern's bonfire. Number 24. Curse-rotted Greatwood. When the Ashen One first traveled into the Undead Settlement's courtyard, he found what used to be a spirit tree that officially was no more. It's now a rotten abomination that has multiple hollows praising and worshipping it. It's my understanding that Lothric's a place overrun with curses, and since these curses can't be cured, they instead need to be transferred to something else. The inhabitants of Lothric's undead settlement chose a spirit tree to be their vessel, taking all their curses, with the worst of all the curses being sealed away within that very same spirit tree. But that didn't last forever. All the curses did eventually overtake that spirit tree, and created the Rotten Walking Stick that we fight during the base game. Combat-wise, this boss is the definition of layup. And I've always said, it's ironic his name's the Greatwood, considering in order to kill him, you gotta hit him in the nuts. Once you get halfway through the Greatwood's health bar, the ground will eventually break, killing all the remaining cannon fodder, and revealing an altar that's home to the Mountmaker's Covenant. A covenant that almost everyone misses on their first playthrough. Unless you're a walkthrough whore, of course. After defeating the smelly tree, you'll acquire its boss soul, and the transposing kiln, a key item that offers the ability to trade your boss souls into boss weapons. Now that's badass. Number 23. Vordt of the Boreal Valley. Vordt is what many people consider to be the first true boss of Dark Souls 3. Yeah, sorry Iudex Gundyr. When the Ashen One first runs into Vordt, it's at the bottom of the high wall of Lothric. Why hello, I'm just passing through. But unfortunately for Vordt, that just wasn't possible. Vordt is a direct descendant of the ancient god and goddesses of Anor Londo, thus making him an Irithylian, a hybrid race between the ancient gods of Anor Londo and humans who reside within Irithyll of the Boreal Valley, a city built for the Irithylians on top of the ruins of Anor Londo. It's my understanding that after Sulyvahn imprisoned Dark Son Gwendolyn, that he proclaimed himself as Pontiff and assumed control of the city. Under the tyrant's rule, Vordt was ordered to serve as a Boreal Outrider Knight, which is the equivalent of being exiled. Before dispatching these knights to foreign lands though, every Boreal Outrider Knight was given the eye rings of the Pontiff, magical rings that transferred the wearers into savage animalistic warriors who only knew how to serve their masters as mindless guards. Oh, Pontiff, just get a dog next time. Thus ensuring Sulyvahn full control over them and preventing them from ever betraying him. As time went on, another big puzzle piece in all of this, Prince Lothric, refused to link the First Flame, and his kingdom eventually fell into ruin. Vordt, along with the division of Boreal Outrider Knights, descended upon Lothric Castle, with the orders of protecting and keeping a watchful eye over the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, another Outrider Knight who's in charge of protecting the entrance to Lothric Castle. So Vordt did the logical thing, of course. He positioned himself at the main gate leading into the city, where the Ashen One and Vordt eventually crossed paths, ensuring a battle between the two. Combat-wise, Vordt can be seen wielding a rather large and unique Great Hammer, harnessing Frostbite, a weapon damage type that's typically harnessed by the Outrider Knights, and because of the rings of the Pontiff, is now fully transformed into a frenzied beast, causing his armor and his hide to become fused together. After defeating Vordt of the BBL Valley, sorry, I couldn't resist. The main gate of Lothric Castle will finally open, showing a destroyed path, and after the Ashen One raises a small Lothric banner, we'll be given an escort to the undead settlement. Number 22, Iudex Gundyr. When the Ashen One awakens by a bell within the Cemetery of Ash, he'll fight his way through multiple Grave Wardens, until eventually running into Iudex Gundyr, a hulking golem of a man, wearing a champion's armor set, and impaled in his chest with the Coiled Sword, a sword used by the Ashen One to link the First Flame, and before Dark Souls 3, was just thought to be a basic fire poker. It's my understanding that Iudex Gundyr was once a champion of Ash himself, who got lost in the folds of time, and found himself within a moment of Firelink Shrine's timeline that found the place darkened and without a firekeeper. Why am I alone? Where is everybody? Afterwards, Gundyr decided to instead guard the entrance to Firelink Shrine, where he became bested by an unknown warrior, presumably us in the past, and afterwards impaled himself with the Coiled Sword in his chest, as a way to judge chosen unkindled ones in the future who wanted to make their way towards Firelink Shrine and link the First Flame. And in fact, the term Iudex in Latin actually means the term judge in English. Yeah, that's some fire shit right there. Judge Gundyr. While idle and waiting for a worthy unkindled one, Iudex Gundyr became infected by a Pus of Man, an enemy type within Dark Souls 3 that infects the undead, usually hollows, with the corrupted abyss, and will explode from their victims' bodies in the form of gigantic red-eyed black blobs that kinda acts as a last stand for Iudex Gundyr in particular, after he starts getting his shit packed. You sore fucking loser! Throughout the years, an entire arena was built around Iudex's remains, with the sole purpose of finding potential champions worthy enough to defeat Iudex Gundyr and reach Firelink Shrine, allowing the doors of Firelink Shrine to be opened once again, and after placing the Coiled Sword in the center of Firelink Shrine's fireplace, offers the Ashen One the ability to fast travel between bonfires. And honestly, there is more to this story, but I'll cover this later on in the video when I cover Champion Gundyr. Number 21, Crystal Sage. Now, I understand that we only have one Crystal Sage boss fight in Dark Souls 3, but believe it or not, the lore of the Crystal Sages is actually a story of two brothers. Once the apprentices of Dark Souls' Big Hat Logan, the famous sorcerer who studied the abilities of Seath the Scaleless, also from Dark Souls, and brought about the discovery of crystal sorceries. Early on, the Crystal Sages were originally the ones responsible for bringing crystal sorceries to Lothric, and spent much of their lives practicing and studying this kind of magic. After much time, the two brothers acquired a large following of students that they would teach crystal sorceries to, and were even considered spiritual guides to the scholars of the Grand Archives. With the Crystal Sage's favorite student, daughter of Crystal Crimhild, receiving the Sage's crystal staff as a gift. A staff that has a crystal sphere fixated at the top of it, that increases the power of sorceries and devours the will of the user. With many of the Crystal Sage's followers going as far as to coat their heads in wax, to help prevent themselves from falling to the same madness that once consumed Seat the Scaleless and Big Hat Logan. Why, hello! Now, whether that actually works is yet to be determined. As time went on, the two brothers eventually went their separate ways. One brother stayed with Farron's Undead Legion, while the other stayed at the Grand Archives to continue their work of studying crystal sorceries, eventually leading to conflict between the scholars of the Grand Archives and the heretic sorcerers allied with Farron. Appearance-wise, the large hats that the Crystal Sages wear mimic the legendary sorcerer Logan, and is an indication of their mastery of crystal sorceries. Number 20. Deacons of the Deep. Every Souls game needs a mob-style boss fight. They're just the best! And the Deacons of the Deep's congregation of clerics has to be From Software's most inspired yet. I mean, who would have thought that Miyazaki would have based their design off the Goombas from the 1993 live-action Super Mario Bros. Movie? But here we are. In all seriousness though, the Deacons of the Deep might be the easiest boss fight in the entire game, but that doesn't always mean the worst, story-wise. It's my understanding that way before the Ashen One entered the Cathedral of the Deep, that the Deacons of the Deep were led by a priest named Archdeacon Royce, with the help of Archdeacon Klimt and Archdeacon McDonald, overseeing the cathedral structure and the rituals that took place there. As time went on, the cathedral eventually welcomed a priest named Aldrich, a priest from Irithyll, who often took pleasure in eating humans, and continued until his body eventually turned into sludge. Oh, Aldrich, you slimy bastard, you! Ultimately, the cathedral found out about Aldrich's savage ways, and instead of exiling him, begun bringing him sacrifices on behalf of the cathedral to help appease Aldrich's hunger, and grant him enough strength to link the First Flame and become a Lord of Cinder. So that's where the name the Road of Sacrifices comes from. This led the cathedral, which used to be a peaceful place known for ritual purification, to now become a place consumed by darkness and corruption, creating the Deep in the process. And it's even said that the Archdeacons eventually abandoned their faith, placing it in their Lord Aldrich in the Rising Deep instead. In the end, Aldrich ended up leaving his tomb to head for Irithyll to devour Dark Sun Gwendolyn from Dark Souls, with Archdeacon Royce and the other deacons staying behind to guard their lord's tomb, bringing us forward to when the Ashen One fights the Deacons at the Cathedral of the Deep. The Deacons are hard to kill for one reason and one reason only. They all share the same roaming soul. After you kill one, 10 more will pop up in its place. Archdeacon Royce merged his soul with all the souls of the other deacons, and after getting this boss to half health, will finally reveal his true form. After defeating the Deacons of the Deep, the player will be rewarded with a dead end. Just kidding. The player will be rewarded with their boss soul, and the small doll key item, a doll that must be in the Ashen One's possession in order to enter Irithyll of the Boreal Valley, and works as a literal key given to those who Pontiff Sulyvahn considered worthy enough to enter Irithyll, and has many similarities to the doll that's needed to enter the painted world of Ariandel in Dark Souls, which to me makes perfect sense, considering Sulyvahn came from the painted world of Ariandel and was most likely inspired and familiar with the story in order to influence his own magic spells. Number 19. High Lord Wolnir, aka the King of Drip. This boss might be a gimmick, and generally uninteresting to fight, but when you dig a little deeper, you'll see that High Lord Wolnir has so much more to offer. Wolnir is from the kingdom of Karthus, a desert kingdom known for their pyromancy and swordsmen. Long before Lothric stood as a city, Wolnir was an accomplished conqueror who went on to slay many lords and conquer many kingdoms, eventually earning the name of the Conqueror of Karthus. Wolnir took all my shit and fucked my wife! It's said that Wolnir took all the lords' crowns from those that he defeated and grounded them all into dust in order to form his own crown. Yeah, that's some savage shit. Making all the crowns become one, and Wolnir, now the one tyrannical High Lord of Karthus. It's my understanding that Wolnir became so consumed with power that he wished to outlive every being in the world and sentence his entire empire to death. Off goes his head, creating the catacombs of Karthus in the process, and formed a skeleton army in hopes of remaining the last being alive. One day, Wolnir found the abyss left behind by Manus, the father of the abyss from Dark Souls, in the form of multiple pyromancies, Black Serpent and Black Flame in particular, and afterwards saw Wolnir seeking to claim the abyss for himself. And boy, did that plan backfire. Wolnir eventually got stuck in the fog of the abyss in the catacombs of Karthus, and while falling deeper and deeper, begged and pleaded with the gods to help keep him safe, but feared the darkness that surrounded him would eventually consume him. Ultimately, Wolnir managed to survive falling into the abyss because he was in possession of a holy sword and 3 sacred armlets that Wolnir took off the bodies of some clerics and helped Wolnir from being consumed. In the end, the gods did answer Wolnir's call, gifting him with a skull-shaped chalice with the ability to warp anyone who touches it to the location in the abyss that Wolnir was stuck at. Smells like a setup, with many thinking that this was so Wolnir could have innocent victims to feed into the abyss as a way to consume their souls and preserve his own life, considering the abyss was slowly consuming him, and is later revealed to be a giant undead skeleton after the Ashen One touches the chalice inside the catacombs of Karthus, teleporting Ashen One into Wolnir's part of the abyss, and even uses the Grave Warden Pyromancy Tome as a way to lure Ashen One in, and say it with me, starting a battle between the two. In order to defeat Wolnir, Ashen One will have to break all of Wolnir's bracelets. Wait, that's it? Yep, that's it. And after doing so, we'll see Wolnir fall into the depths of the abyss, devouring him in the process. Following Wolnir's defeat, Ashen One will wake back up at the catacombs, with the entrance to Irithyll of the Boreal Valley now being open. Number 18. Old Demon King. One of the many demons born from the Chaos Flame, a flame created by the Witch of Izalith's Lord Soul, to be a replacement to the quickly fading First Flame once it was extinguished. It says on the soul of the Old Demon King that the Old Demon King was the last demon to be born from the Chaos of Izalith, aka the Bed of Chaos, before it was extinguished, making him one of the oldest living beings in existence by the time the Ashen One faces him during Dark Souls 3. And it's my understanding that after the destruction of the Bed of Chaos, that the demon race was unable to maintain itself, and eventually became extinct. What? Miyazaki told me I had to. I had to. By the time the Ashen One finally finds the Old Demon King in Smoldering Lake though, he's a shell of his former self, and is found resting among many corpses of his fellow demons. And although it's not really known how or why these corpses reside in this chamber, but I'm under the impression that it could have been the Demon King, using his fellow kin to prolong his own life. I mean, we know demons can't live without the Chaos Flame, so I came up with 2 scenarios. 1, they're huddling together for warmth, until eventually withering away and dying. Or 2, the Old Demon King sucked them dry of all their internal flames, and did so to prolong his own life, with many demons potentially giving up their lives willingly to support their king. But be sure to let me know in the comments section what you guys think about this. Once the Old Demon King eventually starts losing to the Ashen One in battle, his declining power and strength will be on full display. Before the Demon King's internal flame dims for good though, he'll unleash one final fire explosion as a kind of ODK final stand, and afterwards showcases just how weak he's truly become. He's no longer able to stand, and holding a gigantic hammer has now become a huge burden, with the Old Demon King practically giving up by the end of the fight. I mean shit, I almost feel bad for the guy. Psych! Number 17. Champions Gravetender and Gravetender's Greatwolf. Everyone say hi to the first DLC boss on the list, and this one in particular resides within the painted world of Ariandel. Hold up one second, did you just say a painting? Why yes I did. You see, this is a Souls game, and not everything's supposed to make sense. It's called Imagination. Long ago, the undead held a tournament where those that had been cursed would compete to the death. These were called the undead matches, where an undead's worth would be measured by their repeated wins in battle, or in the loser's case, deaths. And to some, This was considered a great gift, because this gave those that have gone hollow a purpose to continue fighting, and was even considered a glorious use of their immortality, with those that have fought to become champions, eventually gaining great renown. One day, the champion from the Undead match eventually went mad from going hollow and passed away, with the champion's prodigy training under him, and his Greatwolf loyally staying behind to protect their master's grave, and the champion's Gravetender in particular, taking up and using his fallen master's sword, called the Valor Heart, to honor his fallen champion. Also, it's my understanding that the pair protected the land for so long that they eventually got drawn into the painted world of Ariandel, where they stayed for all of eternity. After the Ashen One defeats the champion's Gravetender and the Gravetender's Greatwolf, he'll be able to claim the Valor Heart for himself, a unique sword and shield combo that is a one-of-a-kind in Dark Souls 3, as well as the champion's bones, a key item that gives the Ashen One access to the Undead match in the Hollow Arena, making it a real place in game. Yeah, I love that shit. And adds some kick-ass lore context behind dueling hollows like a madman. Fuck around and get smoked, a bitch. Number 16, Yhorm the Giant. It's time for our first Lord of Cinder. Main story bosses, who have extended the Age of Fire by linking the First Flame over time, with Yhorm being the only giant among them. Wait. I'm supposed to fight that thing? It's my understanding that Yhorm was the son of an ancient conqueror, and was tasked with leading the very people who were once enslaved by his father. Despite all that though, Yhorm loved his people dearly, and did all he could to rule over them fairly, even going as far as offering up the only weapon that's capable of hurting or even killing Yhorm, the Storm Ruler, to his people, as a way to build trust and show solidarity should he ever go mad and have to be taken out. Foreshadowing! You see, Yhorm was so powerful and hard to kill that he often acted as a one-man army against any and all threats to his people, selflessly putting himself in harm's way. Freaking Yhorm, dude, the man of the people, dude. As time went on, Yhorm met a knight named Sigurd of Katarina, with the two becoming great friends, and got rather close throughout the years. As a way to build further trust between the two, Yhorm offered Sigurd with a duplicate Storm Ruler, asking the knight to kill him should it ever come to it. Oh Yhorm, I must be so special, thank you! Wait, it's a duplicate and you've done this before? Ah, fuck! Until one day, a fire fell from the sky called the Profaned Flame, a flame that never goes out, and just like the Chaos Flame, was a cheap twisted imitation of the first flame that was nearly impossible to control. In an effort to save his kingdom and extinguish the Profaned Flame, Yhorm offered his Lord Soul to the fire, in hopes that it would stop the flame from spreading, but sadly failed. Afterwards, Yhorm reincarnated himself as the Lord of Cinder, with the intentions that he would one day sacrifice himself again to the first flame, but awoke to his entire home being reduced to ruins, and all of his people either being dead or transformed into vile monsters. With little to nothing left, Yhorm secluded himself in his throne room, where he eventually lost his mind. Anyone that loves me dies. With his throne room slowly becoming filled with the corpses of his people that wanted to hold Yhorm accountable and failed, with one corpse in particular clutching onto the original Storm Ruler. Ultimately, after the Ashen One finally confronts Yhorm inside the Profane Capital, he'll be joined by Sigurd of Katarina, with the Storm Ruler in hand, and as promised, was prepared to put an end to Yhorm's reign. In the end, Sigurd and the Ashen One both stormrolled the fuck out of Yhorm, and shortly afterwards is teleported to Lothric Castle by Emma, the High Priestess, with Yhorm's Lord Soul and Cinders now in the Ashen One's possession. Upon warping back to Yhorm's throne room, it'll be revealed that after fulfilling his duty of freeing his old friend, that Sigurd took his own life, with the Ashen One claiming Sigurd's armor set, his shield, and the Storm Ruler for himself. Number 15, Dragonslayer Armour. Now, there's not much worse than fighting an ancient Dragonslayer, but what is worse is fighting that Dragonslayer's armor. Just the armor. Once belonging to an ancient dragon-slaying warrior from Lothric's history, who served and fought alongside Lord Gwyn's firstborn son, and Dragonslayer Ornstein. It's my understanding that during this time frame that the army of Lothric frequently found themselves facing large numbers of wyverns, and in order to preserve life, and fight them off safely, they crafted heavy suits of armor that could fight off the archdragons on their behalf. With armor capable of withstanding dragon fire and shields made to absorb lightning blasts, their defenses were practically impenetrable. This led to much of the Knights of Lothric building an altar, and even praising the firstborn son of Gwyn, propping him up as their god of war and sun, and even used the power of the sun god to infuse their weapons with the power of lightning, a weapon damage type that's most lethal to dragons, and used the power of the god of war to teach the suits the ancient techniques of hunting archdragons, developed in the war between the ancient gods and the everlasting dragons. In the end, the army of Lothric did successfully hunt down the wyverns, and even learned how to tame and even ride them, giving themselves a huge advantage over other human armies, and over time became known as the symbols of Lothric. Since the dragons were now domesticated, it left the Dragonslayers with very little reason to exist. But Lothric's army kept one armor in particular in its barracks, an armor of an ancient Dragonslayer, left as a monument of the legendary past of Lothric's knights, and stood at the entrance of the Grand Archives. Now, fast forwarding in time to the last days of Lothric, and we see the Ashen One approaching the Grand Archives and awakening the Dragonslayer Armour. It's said on the soul of the Dragonslayer Armour that the armor was awakened and controlled by the Pilgrim Butterflies, undead dragons that use dark magic to control the armor like a puppet and surrounds the arena, with intentions of stopping the Ashen One from reaching the top of Lothric Castle. Ultimately, not much is known beyond speculation on why the Pilgrim Butterflies chose to control the Dragonslayer armor, but what I find to be the most interesting aspect about them is that they're surprisingly similar to the angels found in the Ring City DLC. Similar to how we have to slay the angel's Pilgrim Pupa in order to defeat the angels, the Pilgrim Butterflies will also start to die after slaying the Dragonslayer armor, with many more Pilgrim Butterflies remaining alive in the distance, seemingly implying that Lothric Castle could have other suits of armor being manipulated by Pilgrim Butterflies somewhere on the horizon. Cough cough, Iron Dragonslayer. But be sure to let me know in the comment section what you guys think about this. Number 14, Champion Gundyr. Now, I've already told you the story of Iudex Gundyr, but now's the time for Champion Gundyr to take center stage. Woo woo woo! Champion Gundyr! As I've stated earlier in the video, Champion Gundyr was once a prior Ashen One who got lost in the folds of time and arrived at a point in Firelink Shrine's timeline where it was in total darkness and without a firekeeper. I can't see shit! I can't see shit! In order to test future unkindled ones, Champion Gundyr impaled himself with the coiled sword in the chest, as a way to force those who wanted to link the First Flame to first fight Gundyr to the death and prove their worthiness. It's my understanding that when the Ashen One fights Iudex Gundyr at the beginning of the game, that we're actually killing Gundyr in the future. And after the Ashen One slays Oceiros, the Consumed King, in the Consumed King's gardens, and discovers an illusory wall that leads towards the Untended Grave's location, that the Ashen One was in fact going back in time, with the Gundyr that we now face in the Cemetery of Ash being Champion Gundyr, a younger and stronger version of Gundyr in his prime, now 10 times more aggressive, and is in possession of an iron halberd that easily breaks the poise of his opponent, and according to its item description, is said to be unbreakable. Unlike Iudex Gundyr, once you get Champion Gundyr to half health, he won't explode into a pus of man, but instead will start attacking in a barrage of attacks that can be so aggressive at times that it can combo the Ashen One to death, so be sure to keep your distance. Once the Ashen One finally defeats Champion Gundyr and claims his boss soul for himself, the Ashen One will be able to enter Firelink Shrine in the past, where you can purchase the armor set of Oceiros the Abyss Walker from the Dark Souls Oceiros of the Abyss DLC, as well as obtain the Eye of the Firekeeper behind an illusory wall, a key item that's needed to unlock the End of Fire ending of the base game. Yeah, Miyazaki did not want you to find that. Number 13, Halflight Spear of the Church. Similar to the old monk fight of Demon Souls, the Halflight fight could either find the Ashen One fighting a hostile NPC, or another player. Oh, cometh here, let me clap at them cheeks. After the Ashen One makes his way through the Ring City and enters the Church of Filanor, he'll be challenged by Judicator Argo, followed by Halflight, the Spear of the Church. It's my understanding that the Spear of the Church are warriors who serve Judicator Argo, and will challenge anyone and everyone who approaches the Church of Filanor and wishes to disturb Filanor's slumber. One warrior in particular, named Halflight, was a former missionary from an ancient land that was known for their sorceries, and was the last warrior to stay behind and defend the Church of Felinor. And we all know how that ended. Cheeks clappeth. Combat-wise, this fight is just a good old-fashioned PvP match, and a little bit of a gangbanging at times. So be sure to dispose of Judicator Argo and the Church Guardians before you get too in over your head. After finally defeating Halflight, the Ashen One will gain a Titanite slab to max out a weapon of their choice, as well as Felinor's Spear Ornament, which the Ashen One can use to level up the Spear of the Church Covenant rank. A Covenant where once joined, the player would become an actual Spear of the Church, and once summoned on behalf of the Covenant, would fight to prevent trespassers from disturbing Felinor's slumber. Yeah, ain't no one wakes up my woman but me. Yeah! Number 12. Oceiros, the Consumed King. The former king of Lothric Castle, and the father to Lorian and Lothric. It's my understanding that Oceiros sought to harness his royal bloodline to achieve great power. But there was one huge problem. Lorian and Lothric, Oceiros' first two sons, were deemed unworthy by their father. Lorian had broken legs, and Lothric was weak and cursed, to eventually become a lord of Cinder. So King Oceiros instead favored his third son, Ocelot, who at the time was just an infant, and unlike his brothers, was half dragon. King Oceiros' quest for power ultimately led him to the Grand Archives, where he discovered the notes of Big Hat Logan, left by one of the Crystal Sages, and had information regarding Seath the Scaleless and his immortality. Similar to Big Hat Logan, King Oceiros became obsessed with the thought of harnessing Seath's magic, and so much so to the point that he eventually became consumed with madness. Over time, King Oceiros' obsession with the Pale Dragon grew, even claiming that his Dragon Scale ring could protect him from his enemies, a ring that reduces backstab damage by 30%, with many people believing that this ring in particular is the reason why all the assassins that attempted to kill Oceiros and remove him from power all failed. Back up still, bitch! King Oceiros, deep in his delusions, believed that he had to actually become a dragon in order to produce an heir that's ultimately strong enough to link the fire, leading to Oceiros transforming himself into a distorted scaleless dragon, and fathering another child with Guinevere, Ocelot. Oceiros believed that a descendant of dragons would make the perfect champion, and after obtaining Ocelot, decided to flee with his royal guards to the royal gardens, completely ignoring the status of his kingdom, which eventually went to shit, to protect the child of dragons. Fast forwarding in time, and we have the Ashen One entering the Consumed King's gardens, where Oceiros is seen holding and protecting a baby within his grasp, but after closer inspection, is revealed to not be holding anything at all. It's a common belief within the Souls community that Ocelot is either invisible and is still inside Oceiros' hands, or Ocelot somehow vanished from his father's grasp, but Oceiros still protected Ocelot, under the belief that his son was still in his hands. And Oceiros would do anything to protect his son, especially if that means defeating the Ashen One, starting a war between the two. After defeating Oceiros, the Consumed King, you'll gain his boss soul, which could be used to acquire the legendary Moonlight Greatsword, and if you're a Chad with 400 IQ, you'll roll into this wall here, revealing a path to the untended graves. Number 11. Dancer of the BBL Valley. Sorry, I couldn't resist. After defeating Yhorm the Giant and getting teleported back to Lothric Castle, the Ashen One will get ambushed by this BBL monstrosity after trying to enter Lothric Castle. And if you're still holding on to the Storm Ruler by the time she drops it low, then you just got, well, baited. Yeah, feels bad. It's my understanding that the Dancer is a direct descendant of the royal family of Anor Londo and served Guinevere, the Princess of Sunlight. Similar to Vordt, the Dancer is also Irithylian, a hybrid race between the god and goddesses of Anor Londo and humans, who inhabit Irithyll of the Boreal Valley, a city that was built on top of the ruins of Anor Londo. After Pontiff Sulyvahn conquered Irithyll of the Boreal Valley and imprisoned Dark Sun Gwyndolin, he ordered the Dancer to serve as, well, his dancer, and later enlisted her as a Boreal Outrider Knight, and gave her a pair of enchanted swords that mirrored his own blades by having dark magic in the right hand and fire in the left. Under the tyrant's rule, the Dancer, along with Vordt of the Boreal Valley, were given the eye rings of the Pontiff, magical rings that transforms the wearer into animalistic savage warriors who can only serve as mindless guards and prevents them from ever betraying him. With Pontiff now having full control over them, he sent them to the High Wall of Lothric, to protect the entrance of Lothric Castle. Now, fast forwarding in time, and we have the Ashen One getting teleported to Emma at the High Wall of Lothric, where he witnesses her dying from an unknown assailant, but not before Emma bestows the Ashen One with a Basin of Vows, a key item that grants the Ashen One an entrance to Lothric Castle. But before he was able to place down the basin on the beheading night, the dancer emerged from a portal in the ceiling, with intentions of killing the Ashen One, and stopping him from progressing into Lothric Castle. You shall not pass! Combat-wise, the dancer isn't necessarily a fast opponent, but she does have combos out the ass, and a grab attack that would make anyone feel disrespected. Bitch, get up off me! God damn! After defeating the dancer of the Boreal Valley, you'll get the dancer's boss soul, which gives the Ashen One the ability to transpose the dancer's enchanted swords, one of my personal favorites, or the Soothing Sunlight Miracle. Also, I should note that if you're a madman who likes a challenge, you can actually fight the dancer as the game's second boss by killing Emma early in your playthrough, allowing you to enter Lothric Castle much earlier in the game. But you'll be robbing yourself of one hell of an epic journey, and unless you're a New Game Plus, you'll probably get BBL disintegrated. Number 10. Demon in Pain and Demon from Below / the Demon Prince. Long after the chosen undead slayed the bed of chaos from Dark Souls 1 and apprehended the Chaos Flame to fuel the first flame, a champion demon was born as a prince to rekindle the Chaos Flame and keep the demon race thriving. Known for leaving destruction in their wake, the demons, led by the Demon Prince, eventually invaded the kingdom of Lothric, leading to an epic showdown between the Demon Prince and Prince Lorian, what I call the Great Battle of the Princes, and ended with Prince Lorian defeating the Demon Prince, but at the cost of losing his legs. And it's even said that the Demon Prince's fiery blood stained Lorian's greatsword, engulfing it in flames. After his defeat, the Demon Prince fled beneath the earth, forgetting about the flame that burns within him, and eventually led to the extinction of the demon race. As the world began to fall apart, because of the fading first flame, the Demon Prince split his essence into two giant bat-winged demons, the Demon in Pain and the Demon from Below. Now, it's my understanding that as long as the two demons remembered the power and determination of the original Demon Prince, that whoever the last one slain was would be reborn as the new Demon Prince and revive the Chaos Flame. Hold up, that was until the Ashen One found them. Upon falling to the depths of the Dread Heap, the Ashen One will find himself in the same area that once comprised Firelink Shrine from the original Dark Souls, and upon landing, awakens the demons from their slumber. Combat-wise, both demons share the same attack patterns, and harness two forms, ignited and extinguished. When ignited, they become far more aggressive, and actively pursue the player, but when they're extinguished, they seem to hang towards the back more, and only attack once approached. So clearly, the best strategy is to separate the two demons until you defeat one. Once both demons finally go down, the last demon defeated will be revived as the new Demon Prince. Oh, how I love when they beat me, dude. Oh, how I love it when they beat me, dude. And depending on which one it was, will harness different abilities. If the Demon in Pain becomes the Demon Prince, it'll utilize the floating Chaos spell to summon large meteors to drop down on the player. And if it's the Demon from Below, then it'll utilize the Seething Chaos spell that fires large laser beams from the prince's mouth. Yeah, it's some bullshit. After defeating the Demon Prince, the Ashen One will acquire its boss soul, and after progressing forward a bit, we'll get grabbed by some bat-winged demons that will fly the Ashen One to the Ring City. Number 9. The Abyss Watchers. There's not many boss fights that give you quite a rush, like the Abyss Watchers on a first-time playthrough. But there's just something about getting gangbanged by Farron's undead legion, without my consent, that really turns me on. What? What about it? The Abyss Watchers are a group of undead warriors, who took inspiration after the Wolf Knight of Anor Londo, Knight Artorias, and were the main component behind the undead legion of Farron. It's my understanding that the Abyss Watchers were formed to help combat the threat of the Abyss, seeking out and destroying any sign of abyssal corruption, and sought to help prevent further outbreaks, or perhaps, the release of an uncontainable monstrosity. Seeking to use the techniques of Artorias, the Abyss Watchers consumed wolf's blood as a way to gain Artorias' strength and agility, turning them into coordinated and sporadic pack hunters, similar to actual wolves themselves. And believe it or not, the wolf's blood did much more than just enhance their bodies, all who consumed the wolf's blood became linked to the soul of Artorias, and instead of each watcher having their own distinct soul, they all shared just one that was distributed among them. Now, although the Abyss Watchers aren't overtly evil, they aren't actually on the good side of the spectrum either. It's said that even with the slightest threat of the Abyss, that the Watchers would come and decimate entire territories to the ground. Wait. Those aren't warriors, that's a nuke. As time went on, the wolf's blood of Farron eventually dried up, and with that, the power of the Abyss Watchers weakened. With the Abyss Watchers' power now reduced, the Abyss spread throughout Lothric, and eventually saw the Abyss Watchers driven into madness by going hollow, clashing at the closest source of the Abyss, and in this case, that was now each other, leading us to when the Ashen One stumbles upon the Abyss Watchers' hideout in the back of Farron Keep. The Watchers have all massacred one another, leaving only one to fight the Ashen One as he enters the hideout, and after a fight ensues, we'll quickly see two more Abyss Watchers rise to kill the Ashen One, or the other Watchers. Yeah, I'ma just let that man do all the work. After defeating the main Abyss Watcher, all the Watchers with red eyes will also die, but in a last-ditch attempt of desperation, we'll see the final Abyss Watcher rise again, by absorbing all the blood of his fallen brethren, replenishing himself to full health. Oh, how I love it when they bait me, dude. Oh, how I freaking love it when they bait me, dude. And in doing so, revive the final Abyss Watcher as a Lord of Cinder, restoring its ember and igniting its body and sword with fire. Man, I wish I was that cool. Design-wise, their kick-ass outfits and pointed hats eventually became an ill omen to whoever crossed paths with them, and they even created their very own ultra greatsword, known as the Farron Greatsword, a one-of-a-kind greatsword that's paired well with a carved dagger, and kills in style. Man, fuck these breakdancing motherfuckers! After defeating the corrupted Abyss Watchers, the Ashen One will acquire their Lord Cinder and their Lord Soul, which can be used to transpose the Farron Greatsword and the Wolf Knight's Greatsword, the Greatsword once used by Taurus the Abyss Walker, and goes hard as fuck. Number 8. Pontiff Sulyvahn. Now, it's time for one of the greatest villains in all of Dark Souls history. Born from the painted world of Ariandel, Sulyvahn wanted far more for himself than what the frosted world of Ariandel could provide. At a young age, Sulyvahn demonstrated incredible intelligence within the sorcerous arts by creating many frost-based sorceries, most notably Snap Freeze and Frozen Weapon, but decided to leave them behind to seek further knowledge in the outside world. And Sulyvahn did eventually leave the painted world, stumbling upon Iudex of the Boreal Valley in the process, and although Sulyvahn wasn't technically of divine blood, he was still welcome among the descendants of the old gods, impressing Dark Sun Gwendolyn in particular. When Sulyvahn was still young, he ventured and unearthed the profane capital underneath Iudex, and deep within the ruins of the capital, Sulyvahn found the profane flame, an unfading and everlasting flame, considered by some to hold the dark of humanity. And after obtaining it, an unquenchable thirst for power consumed Sulyvahn's heart. Sulyvahn hated the thought of a world revolving around a fading flame, especially while his was everlasting, and eventually rejected the leadership of Iudex. Planning to use the profane flame to its advantage, Sulyvahn declared himself as Pontiff and ordered his Outrider Knights to secure the surrounding lands. It'll all be mine. Paranoid, Pontiff Sulyvahn gave all the Outrider Knights magical rings that ensured the wearers never betrayed him, but on the flip side, turned them into animalistic warriors who used weapons imbued in the frost magic of the Pontiff. In addition, Sulyvahn put up a magical barrier over Iudex of the Boreal Valley and distributed special dolls to his most valuable subjects, so that way they could pass through freely. As time went on, Sulyvahn instituted the help of Aldrich and his Church of the Deep to further his grip over the Boreal Valley, and allowed Aldrich to devour Dark Sun Gwendolyn, the last of the gods of old Anor Londo, and later imprison Yorshka in the tower above her church. Sulyvahn's influence can be felt all over Dark Souls 3, with huge fights such as Vordt and the Dancer only existing because of Pontiff Sulyvahn's existence in-game. Yeah, he's one evil motherfucker. Combat-wise, Pontiff uses dual swords that represents the balance between fire and dark, holding the profane greatsword in his right hand, an ultra greatsword that's infused with the power of the dark profane flame, and the greatsword of judgment in his left hand, a greatsword infused with the darkness of the moon, as well as a symbol of his judgment of Dark Sun Gwendolyn. After defeating Pontiff Sulyvahn, the Ashen One will open a path to Anor Londo, and obtain the soul of Pontiff Sulyvahn, which can be transposed to claim the profane greatsword or the Greatsword of Judgment. Two incredible greatswords, so be sure to play through the game twice. Number 7. Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. There's not many bosses in Dark Souls 3 that would immediately make you sick to your stomach, quite like Aldrich. Yup, he's one dirty motherfucker. At one point in his life, Aldrich was just an average-looking human man, originally from Iudex of the Boreal Valley, implying that he's one of the descendants of the old god and goddesses of Anor Londo, and was once a cleric of the Way of White Covenant. Despite his role as a man of faith though, Aldrich became obsessed with consuming human flesh, and found great pleasure in hearing their final screams. Oh my god, no! Aldrich, please! Don't eat my ass, please! As time went on, and Aldrich continued his savage ways, his body eventually turned into an obese black mass of rotten maggot-ridden sludge, and was filled with the remains of his victims. Well shit, I guess you are what you eat. And continued for so long that even his finicky ally and fellow Erythelian, Pontiff Sulyvahn, decided to exile him and imprisoned him inside the Church of the Deep, a church that used to specialize in ritual purification, but later became the home of Aldrich's tomb. Pontiff Sulyvahn did allow Aldrich to return home someday though, gifting him with a small doll that would allow him to pass through Pontiff's magical barrier. VIP, baby! Continuing to feast upon humans, Aldrich grew to great strengths, and became a Lord of Cinder, with the Archdeacons of the Cathedral of the Deep, feeding a constant stream of sacrifices to Aldrich. Many years later, and we have Aldrich waking up inside of his tomb. Aldrich desired to leave the Church of the Deep, and head for Iudex of the Boreal Valley to devour Dark Son Gwyndolin. Ultimately, Aldrich and his army of Deacons invaded Iudex, steamrolling Pontiff's forces in the process, with Gwyndolin even agreeing to sacrifice himself to Aldrich to save Yorshka, Gwyndolin's sister. This led to Aldrich gaining Dark Son Gwyndolин's abilities, and even made use of Gwyndolин's weapons and corpse, by covering his obese sludge-like body to hide the hideous monster that Aldrich has now become. With some people thinking that this was because, by the time the Ashen One confronts Aldrich, that he was still absorbing Gwyndolин's body. Ugh. Nasty motherfucker, man. Bringing us forward to when the Ashen One confronts Aldrich, in the same location where the Chosen Undead fights Ornstein and Smough in Dark Souls. The legendary Anor Londo. Aldrich, otherwise known as the Saint of the Deep, wanted to put an end to the Age of Fire and bring in the Age of the Deep, turning this once shimmering chamber of Anor Londo into a dark and abyss-ridden shell of his former self. Finally, one last thing I should mention about Aldrich is in regards to his two magical rings, Aldrich's Ruby and Aldrich's Sapphire. Aldrich's Ruby restores the HP of the wearer after delivering a critical hit, while Aldrich's Sapphire, you guessed it, restores FP while also delivering a critical hit. Both color-coded, which is nice, and much like the Devourer of Gods, drains health and energy from the next unlucky soul that happens to be in its way. Number 6. Twin Princes, Lorian and Lothric. Before we had Consort Radahn, we had the Twin Princes, two fights that were their similarities. Well, they're back. The Twin Princes consist of Lorian, the Elder Prince and rightful heir to the throne, and Lothric, the younger prince, who was born sick and frail, and was destined to sacrifice himself someday to fuel the First Flame and uphold the Age of Fire. Both sons of Oceiros, the king of Lothric, before he became the Consumed King, and Guinevere, the Queen of Lothric, and prior Princess of Sunlight. Oceiros, my boy! Lorian, who was raised as a fearless knight, received ancient brass armor handed down by the royal family, as well as Lorian's helm, a crown that's patterned in flames, and is a symbol of Lothric's history of fire kindling. One day, Lothric Castle got invaded by the Chaos Demons, and a great war ensued, leading to Prince Lorian and the Demon Prince battling it out, with Prince Lorian single-handedly defeating the Demon Prince, but not without suffering a great loss himself. Lorian's royal armor set and his greatsword got eternally stained and charred by the Demon Prince's fiery blood, with Lorian's greatsword in particular becoming engulfed in the flames of chaos. And then we have Lothric, who was born a sick and fragile child, and was destined to sacrifice himself someday to uphold the Age of Fire, but was never truly considered the last hope of the royal family. A culmination of generations of Lothric's rulers, obsessed with producing a worthy champion, to feed to the fire. It's my understanding that due to the sins of their father, the Lorian and Lothric were both cursed, causing them to share the same soul, and severely affected their health. Lothric spent much of his life bedridden, while Lorian, who used to be a mighty knight, eventually became mute and crippled after embracing his brother's curse. Ultimately, the twin princes rejected their duty of becoming Lords of Cinder, and regardless of years of fire-kindling traditions, decided to let the fire fade, unknowingly resurrecting the other Lords of Cinder, and barricaded themselves in their throne room, with the intentions of allowing their kingdom to fall. But unfortunately for the twin princes, the Ashen One said, fuck that shit! Bringing us forward to when the Ashen One defeats the twin princes inside the throne room of Lothric Castle. Lorian, the fearless knight, took on the Ashen One first, but after learning his attack patterns, is quickly dealt with, followed by Lothric, who repeatedly resurrects his twin brother while using him to fight on his behalf, and considering that they have a joint soul, only dies after defeating Lothric in particular. AKA, you gotta kill them both. After defeating the twin princes, you'll acquire their Lord Soul, which can be used to transpose Lothric's Holy Sword, or Lorian's Great Sword. But unlike other weapons within Dark Souls 3, after you play through the game twice, and acquire both Great Swords, a new option to transpose a third Great Sword with Lilith the Curland becomes available. And similar to the twin princes' shared soul, if you combine both Lothric's Holy Sword and Lorian's Great Sword, you'll create a new kick-ass third Great Sword called the Twin Prince's Great Sword. But be warned, because doing so will sacrifice both swords in exchange for the Twin Prince's Great Sword, and in order to reacquire them, you'll have to play through the game again, twice. Number 5, Soul of Cinder. The infamous knight on the cover of Dark Souls 3, and I must say, it sucks he's the final boss, because this man's armor set is fresh as a fuck. It's my understanding that the Soul of Cinder is a manifestation of every Lord of Cinder who have sacrificed themselves to link the First Flame, with the Soul of Cinder's one purpose being to defend the flame and ensure that the Age of Fire continues. If the Soul of Cinder is defeated, then an Age of Dark would consume the world. The Soul of Cinder, although it might look like a hulking knight is inside of it, is actually just an empty armor set, with its soul possessing all the skills and abilities of all the previous champions, making it a huge pain in the ass to beat on a first time playthrough. Defeating the Soul of Cinder will be the ultimate test of strength. Its weapon of choice, the Fire Link Greatsword, is a massive version of the coiled sword that can change its shape to suit the Soul of Cinder's needs. And for my next trick, also, after the Ashen One gets the Soul of Cinder's health low enough, it'll embody the Soul of Gwen from Dark Souls, utilizing the same attack patterns. Yeah, that shit goes hard. After defeating the Soul of Cinder, the Ashen One will be able to link the fire, and depending on which ending you choose, will have multiple different outcomes, with my personal favorite being the Usurpation of Fire ending. A ending where the Ashen One becomes the new Dark Lord, after suffocating the First Flame, bringing in the Age of Dark. But be sure to let me know which ending is your personal favorite in the comments section. Number 4, Darkeater Midir. When it came to recapturing the vibe and hulking presence that was Black Dragon Calamite in Dark Souls, then Darkeater Midir definitely gave it a run for its money. Before his extravagant boss fight, you'll encounter Midir multiple times within the Ring City. Sometimes he'll burn you to a crisp, and other times, you'll get a taste of what Darkeater Midir is capable of. And boy, was I not prepared. It's my understanding that Darkeater Midir was a descendant of the Archdragons, and was raised by the gods themselves. Because of Midir's immortality, he was given the duty of fighting off the Abyss and its creations for all of eternity, and continued even after the gods were already dead. Tonight will be the night that I will fight the Abyss over again. Over time, fighting the Abyss and its creations eventually damaged Midir beyond repair. The dark seeped into Midir's body and infected him from the inside, forming many of the dark crystals that you see in place of Midir's scales, with his name even implying that he's a Dark Eater, and most likely consumed multiple sources of potent Abyss. Now, it's not known whether or not Darkeater Midir is fully consumed by the Abyss by the time the Ashen One faces him in the Ring City, but he has progressed to the point of harnessing the Abyss, making fighting him an even bigger pain in the ass. Combat-wise, this fight can go fuck itself. At this point in my Dark Souls 3 journey, I can beat Midir in 1 to 3 tries, but man, did it take hours of playtime to get good for this one.
Why, hello, Midir. Say hello to my Dragonslayer, a great axe.
The amount of health that Midir has, coupled with the fact that he's immune or resistant to just about every damage type in the game, makes this fight more reliant on endurance and player positioning than anything else. Yeah, he's one squirmy little bitch. After finally defeating Midir, he'll drop the Spear of the Church Covenant item, as well as the Soul of Darkeater Midir, which can be transposed into one of my favorite weapons in the game, the Frayed Blade Katana, and the Old Moonlight Sorcery, a sorcery version of the Moonlight Greatsword, and based off its item description, was created from a memory found deep within Midir, of a sword that was created not long after the beginning of time, seemingly confirming that it's not connected to Seath the Scaleless, but rather was created even before Seath the Scaleless' time, aka Kingsfield II. Number 3, Sister Friede, and Father Ariandel. There's not many boss fights that would make you teeter on the brink of insanity, quite like Sister Friede and Father Ariandel.
I'm going crazy!
But it's this reason in particular that makes this fight so memorable. It's my understanding that Sister Friede, otherwise known as Friede, was once a prior Ashen One who tried to take the First Flame by force, on behalf of Primordial Serpent Darkstalker Kaith, but ultimately failed, and resulted in her being resurrected as Ash. Friede and her 2 sisters, Yori of Londor and Liliane, all sought to help Kaith end the Age of Fire and bring in the Age of Dark, leading to all the sisters being taught the power of the Dark Hand, and ultimately formed the Sable Church, with Friede as its leader. As time went on, they created an entire society of undeads and hollows that eventually became known as Londor, the Land of Hollows. And in fact, invasions from Londor Pale Shades in particular are knights or assassins sent on behalf of the Sable Church to fulfill their duties, and were even taught the power of the Dark Hand themselves. At some point, Friede accepted Sir Wilhelm as her knight, bestowing upon him her Onyx Blade Greatsword, a greatsword engulfed in black flame, and like everyone else, also had the power of the Dark Hand. Now, to pursue the interests of Londor, and realize their dream of bringing in an Age of Dark, Friede finally attempted to usurp the First Flame, but only managed to grab a spark, before it turned into Black Flame, and although she ultimately failed, the Black Flame still consumed her, burning her face, and leaving her unkindled. Now fast forwarding in time. As the First Flame continued to fade, and Prince Lothric refused to link it, we have all the unkindled ones getting exhumed from their graves, among them Sister Friede, to hunt down all the Lords of Cinder, who refused to return to their thrones, and serve as fuel for the First Flame once again. Leaving behind her old name, Friede, the Sable Church, and Londor, Sister Friede decided to head to the painted world of Ariandel, where she eventually got drawn into the painting, becoming the first Ashen One to reside within it. Here Sister Friede learned to harness frost magic, and even decided that it would be her new home, where she wanted to help protect the inhabitants of the painted world. To make the inhabitants as comfortable as possible, Sister Friede mimicked the look of their mistress, Priscilla, even going as far as to wield Friede's great scythe to help the inhabitants feel more at home. At some point, her knight Sir Wilhelm found her at the painted world and returned to her service, and although he was technically released from her service, decided to stay anyways. That's one loyal motherfucker. Give that boy a raise. Now, we made it to the part of the story where we get introduced to Father Ariandel, who Sister Friede became very close with after traveling to the painted world. It's my understanding that Father Ariandel was a great Corvian who was tasked with guarding the flame inside the painted world, reigniting the flame if the painting begun to rot. However, just as the painting began to get corrupted, and its inhabitants made up their minds to a quick death, Sister Friede opposed their wish, instead preferring a slow death within the comforting rot of the painted world's fading flame. This led to Friede convincing Father Ariandel to bury the flame of the painting by using his own blood, and even lock the painter inside the library of the Corvian village, guarded by Sir Wilhelm, to prevent her from ever restoring the painting. Yeah, that's some diabolical shit, and is the primary reason why Slave Knight Gael escaped from the painted world, taking with him a rotted piece of the painting, to search for another unkindled one who would fulfill the prophecy of the painted world, stating that when the ashes inside the painting become two, aka 2 Ashen Ones, that the flame would return once again and burn the rot away. Foreshadowing! Finally leading us to when the Ashen One confronts Sister Friede inside Ariandel Chapel. In an effort to protect the flame and Father Ariandel, Sister Friede can be found blocking the entrance, but kindly asks the Ashen One to leave the painted world, even gifting them the Chillbite ring, a ring that gives the wearer frost resistance. Nothing to see here, nothing to see here. And after the Ashen One ignores her request, finding a mechanism in the rot-infested basement of the chapel, a secret entrance to the heart of Ariandel Chapel will open, revealing Father Ariandel, and shortly afterwards is confronted by Sister Friede in her Frost Great Scythe. Combat-wise, Sister Friede is by far the most complex boss fight, mechanically, and after defeating Sister Friede the first time, we'll see Father Ariandel become enraged, striking the flame and bleeding to an excessive amount, in a desperate attempt to revive Sister Friede, rekindling her and linking their souls together. Now, after finally dispatching Father Ariandel, both Sister Friede and Father Ariandel will perish, but not before.
Oh, how I love it when they bait me, dude. Oh, how I freaking love it when they bait me, dude.
Sister Friede will rise one last time, and thanks to her inner dark flame, will rise this time as Black Flame Friede, a version of Sister Friede that now uses 2 great scythes to harness the power of Black Flame and Frost magic, respectively. After finally defeating Black Flame Friede, the Ashen One will acquire Sister Friede's boss soul, which allows the player to transpose Friede's great scythes and the Rose of Ariandel, the whip that once belonged to Father Ariandel and was used to shed his own blood on behalf of the flame. Also, following Friede's demise, the cathedral itself will catch fire, seemingly implying that the entire painted world will also soon catch flame, allowing the painter to finally paint a new one. Number 2. Slave Knight Gael. When the Ashen One first stumbled upon the cleansing chapel at the Cathedral of the Deep, he meets a lowly slave knight named Gael, praying at the altar.
God, if you're listening, please send me an Ashen One, and if you could, preferably a dumb one, that I could trick inside the painting.
But upon realization that Gael has finally found what he's so desperately been looking for, he'll offer the Ashen One a rotted piece of the painting of Ariandel, a piece of the literal portal of the painted world itself, and after touching it, we'll get teleported into the painting. It's my understanding that the slave knights were undeads that were used as cannon fodder for the most violent battles in Lothric's history, wearing vibrant red hoods to signify their status, and regardless of their physical or mental conditions, were never relieved of their duties.
What, y'all wanna live forever?
At some point, Gael managed to escape his life of constant bloody battles and ended up inside the painted world of Ariandel, where Gael eventually met the painter, a girl with such knowledge of the First Flame and the Dark Soul that she's able to use them to paint a world. Gael and the painter ultimately became very close, creating an almost parental-like bond between the two, and even picked up the nicknames Lady for the Painter and Uncle Gael for, well, Gael. As time went on, Sister Friede, an unkindled one who tried to usurp the First Flame and failed, discovered the painted world of Ariandel and made it her new home. But once the painting started to rot, insisted on letting the painting rot away over time, convincing Father Ariandel, whose entire purpose was to engulf the painting if it ever started to rot, to use his own blood to hold back the flame, and even imprison the painter within the library of the Corvian village. Leading us to when Gael escaped the painting, tearing off and taking with him a rotted piece of it to wander around Lothric, in search of a second unkindled one, to fulfill the prophecy of the painted world. A prophecy that claims when 2 Ashen Ones enter the painting, that their flame would return once again to burn the rot away. Foreshadowing! Bringing us forward to when the Ashen One defeats Sister Friede and Father Ariandel within the painted world. With the flame now reignited to burn away the painting, the painter was finally able to paint a new one. But there was one huge problem. The new world that the painter wanted to paint was missing a special pigment, the Dark Soul, a primordial Lord Soul that was created by the furtive pygmy and was used to create humankind, and ultimately sent Gael on a new mission to find the Dark Soul and bring it back to the painter so she can complete the painting. Ultimately, Gael knew that he wasn't a strong enough champion, and that taking the Dark Soul that was within him would most likely destroy and consume him. So Gael went on an endless journey, spanning many centuries of grueling battles and hardships, but Gael was determined to not return empty-handed. In the end, like literally the end of the world, Gael's journey brought him to the Ringed City, where everything's been reduced to dust, rubble, and ash. And even Gael's own body suffered greatly from his journey, being consumed by the overexpanded dark sign that ultimately fused his flesh with his now rusted and cracked armor set. Within the ruins of the city, Gael found the Pygmy Kings, holders of the Dark Soul, inherited from the primordial Pygmy. However, their blood had run dry ages ago, essentially making it useless to the painter. But still, determined to complete his mission and not return empty-handed, Gael slaughtered all the Pygmies with his Executioner's Greatsword, my actual favorite weapon in the game, then proceeded to eat and drink the Dark Souls from their bodies, in a desperate attempt to claim them for himself, and make them strong enough again to be useful to the painter. Yeah, that didn't work, leading to the Ashen One finding Gael within the ruins of the Ringed City, and after being teleported to the end of the world by a slumbering Felinor, will start a battle between the two. After finally defeating Gael, the Ashen One will acquire his boss soul, which can be transposed into the Executioner's Greatsword, or the Repeating Crossbow. A bow that never stops fucking shooting, and for the love of God, can burn in hell, as well as the Blood of the Dark Soul key item, which can be given to the painter upon returning to the Chapel of Ariandel. And after a short dialogue exchange, and unaware of Gael's death at the hands of the Ashen One, reveals that she's going to paint a new world using the blood of Slave Knight Gael, and naming this world after the Ashen One, Ash. Number 1. Nameless King. Now, it's time for the best boss lore in all of Dark Souls 3, the Nameless Chad. Once a dragon-slaying god of war, worshipped by humans, and is the firstborn son of Gwen. Hold up, like Dark Souls Gwen? Yup, like Dark Souls Gwen. During the war against the dragons, the Nameless King fought alongside his father, Lord Gwen, and Dragonslayer Ornstein, learning to harness lightning spears similar to his father, and even learned to imbue his sword spear with the power of lightning damage. As the son of Gwen grew in renown, he decorated his armor set with the scales of the dragons he's slain, and even became Dragonslayer Ornstein's first knight. This led the Nameless King to form his own covenant of the Warriors of Sunlight, and even handed out medals with the symbol of the sun engraved on them as trophies, recognizing their efforts, and after acquiring enough of them, would reward his followers with the Sacred Oath and Great Lightning Spear miracles. Now, after Lord Gwen left to link the First Flame, the throne of Anor Londo would pass to the king's eldest son, the Nameless King, now wearing the Golden Crown, and eventually saw him creating one of the strongest militaries of all time, said to be second to none. As time passed, the Nameless King ultimately betrayed Anor Londo, aligning himself with the dragons, who was their nemesis.
You backstabbing son of a bitch!
And even taught himself to tame and even ride them. And considering Anor Londo once fought the dragons to near extinction, this was deemed an unforgivable sin, which ultimately saw the Nameless King being dethroned and exiled from the city, leading to all of his statues getting destroyed, and his name erased from the history books of Anor Londo, earning the name of the Nameless King in the process. Over the centuries, the Nameless King and his Stormdrake continued the warrior's life, taking part in multiple battles, and after the Ashen One rings the Great Bell at Archdragon Peak. Wait, weren't we just told not to do this?
No, don't worry, man. Just pull that shit.
Will finally be met with his greatest challenge yet. After traversing the fog, the Ashen One will be ambushed by the King of the Storm, swooping in on the Nameless King's behalf, and with the intentions of clapping the Ashen One's cheeks.
Please, no more fire, please.
After defeating the King of the Storm, though, the Nameless King will claim the soul of his Stormdrake, as this was custom in the Age of Gods. And just as you'd expect from someone dubbed the God of War, decided to challenge the Ashen One head on.
Bait me and did!
Creating one of the best and satisfyingly rhythmic boss fights FromSoft has ever created. Combat-wise, the Nameless King is challenging, but the fact of the matter is that it's just fun as hell, so I never really cared about how many times I died. It's a monumental achievement. After finally defeating the Nameless King, you'll acquire his boss soul, which allows you to transpose one of 3 weapons or miracles. The Dragonslayer Sword Spear, the Nameless King's signature weapon, the Storm Curved Sword, and the Lightning Storm Miracle. Literally the only boss soul in the entire game, which allows you to choose between 3 items on a first-time playthrough.
Gimme.
And similar to the Twin Princes, will require 3 playthroughs to acquire all of them. Now that's what I call endgame. So be sure to get good, and don't be a bitch. It's time to put this God of War in its place. Now thank you guys so much if you stayed the entire time. Dark Souls 3 is a special game to so many of us. It's a game that I can confidently and gladly say that I can't live without. I love Dark Souls 3 and its lore, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video, because this was a massive project and a huge undertaking. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this. Which boss in Dark Souls 3 is your personal favorite? Which one do you think is the hardest? And are you excited for Elden Ring Night Reign? Let me know everything in the comments section. Now, as always, big thank you to all the Dark Souls wikis out there. This video was made primarily off my knowledge of Dark Souls 3, but I will say that some parts of the video were not possible to make without the help of the wikis. So thank you. Now remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, do anything you guys can to help me. I am just one guy and I make these videos because it is my passion. So thank you very much, have a nice day. This has been Drew Spacely. Peace.
Dancer of the BBL Valley. Oh shit. I didn't mean it. I swear I didn't mean it.
Sorry. One more thing. I waste a lot of time and energy making this video right here. So please, go check it out. Like right now. Go check it out like right now. Like right now. Go check it out. Go check it out like right now.